Hour 2 Overdrive begins on this Mail It In Friday. Gord Miller, Frankie Corrado, as the opening ceremony at the Olympics is winding down. Zinedine Zidane handed off the Olympic flame to Rafael Nadal, who's had his success in Paris, 14-time French Open champion.
I was going to say, one of our producers at TSN, Megan Redwood, will be very, very happy to see that.
She loves Rafa.
Yeah.
The Eiffel Tower, a central part of the Olympic experience this year. It's part of the logo. It's the venue for beach volleyball is right there.
That's really cool.
I'm actually going to that to beach volleyball at that venue when I'm there. I'm looking forward to it.
It's interesting that you picked beach volleyball of all the events to go to.
It's at the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, okay. Good scenery at the Eiffel Tower.
It was in Rio in 2016. It was on Copacabana Beach.
Right.
It was amazing.
I remember at the Pan Am Games here in Toronto, it was right by BMO Field.
Yes.
It was right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's all ongoing, but still to come, we'll talk to Josh Lewinberg about the Canadian men's basketball team starting tomorrow against Greece in the group of death, they call it, at the Olympic men's basketball competition. We'll also talk to Lawrence Applebaum, the CEO of Golf Canada. The Canadian Women's Open is on. The CPKC Open is on in Calgary, and Brooke Henderson reeled off 3 straight birdies.
There we go. Now we're talking.
To get things going there. So we'll talk to him about the situation, which includes some smoke in the air from forest fires in Alberta, which is not ideal. So all of that still to come, but we're going to have Steve Phillips join us in a couple of minutes, our Blue Jay analyst, or our baseball analyst, and the Jays, if you missed it, have made a trade. Yimi Garcia, the reliever, one of the top right-handed relievers available, thought to be available in the trade market, goes to the Seattle Mariners for outfielder Jonatan Clase, who has been playing mostly in Double-A, began last year in High A and Single A, but is known for his speed, a base stealer. And that's kind of one of the interesting things in baseball that, base stealing for a while there was a no-no, right? No sacrificing, no stealing bases. And by the way, Rafael Nadal is on a boat in the rain, and the Olympic flame may go out. This is reminiscent of Wayne Gretzky on the back of the pickup truck in Vancouver in the rain, taking the torch to the Olympic flame.
Don't let it go out. Don't let the flame go out, Rafa.
I don't think it can. And he's handed off to to Serena Williams.
Okay.
There you go. A little play-by-play of the Olympic opening ceremony. They look very cold and wet on the boat.
This is it's a very strange watch. I think the Eiffel Tower stuff is really cool with the light show that they're putting on right now, but it's been weird. It's been a weird opening ceremony.
It's been avant-garde. We'll use that term. Yeah. But so the Jays, the dominoes have started to fall. The baseball trade deadline is on Tuesday. The Jays begin a series tonight against the Texas Rangers, who are the defending World Series champions, but they've had a tough go this year. They're right now kind of on the periphery of the wild card race. They're 5 games out. They've won 5 in a row, so that gets them kind of back in the chase. But they need to go on a run here.
Well, and the team that the Jays make a trade with is the Seattle Mariners, and Seattle, of course, is 3.5 games back of that final wild card spot. So they're looking to bolster their bullpen a little bit. So they get Yimi Garcia. And now we're going to see where the chips fall for the Jays. Where does Yusei Kikuchi go? And we kind of expected that players that have some kind of value on expiring contracts will be moved by the Jays. That seemed like a no-brainer. But, what happens to guys that are still under team control? Like, is there something to be done there where you can make, we say it all the time in hockey. It's make a hockey trade, which doesn't happen all the time. But when it does, it's front page, it's headline news. Is there a baseball trade that might be made to help kind of, ignite things for this 2025 playoff chase that they seem to be talking about?
Well, that's the thing, right? And that's what we want to talk to Steve about is what can they expect to get? And I'll be interested to hear what he has to say about Jonatan Clase. So some scouting services have him ranked as the 6th best prospect for the Mariners. Now, he made the point, Steve did, in his TSN.ca article this morning that the 5th best prospect for one team might be the 15th best for the Orioles, whose farm team is stacked.
Exactly.
So when you look at these rankings, you have to be a little careful about where these guys are ranked. But if you're getting good players, you're getting good players. And that's kind of the point of the whole deal. So joining us now on the Maple Toyota Hotline is the one and only Steve Phillips. And Steve, your timing is serendipitous today as you join us moments after the Blue Jays make a trade. Yimi Garcia to Seattle for Jonatan Clase. What do you think and what do you know about him?
Yeah, so I like this trade for the Mariners. Yeah, so I wrote today about what could be expected in return, and said, when you say, okay, I got some of these 10th ranked prospects, it's not apples to apples, right? It depends on the organization, the depth of it. The Mariners farm system is very good, and I really like Jonatan Clase as well. He can run. I think he's got like 26 stolen bases so far this year. There's some pop in his bat as well. I think he's a guy that got a little taste of the big leagues, wasn't quite ready for it yet. But I think he's a really nice pickup and a guy that could potentially be an everyday outfielder for the Jays, as he continues to develop his offensive game. So I do like this for them a lot. And, Garcia was going to be a highly sought-after guy with how well he's pitched. 73 appearances last year, 62 a couple years ago, 61 the year. I mean, he's a workhorse coming out of the pen. Now, he went on the IL a little bit, but he's come back throwing the ball. Well, I'm a little surprised at Seattle, considering that, they really need offense, and they get Randy Rosarena, but then you think about it and think there's not enough players that they can acquire to add to the offense to make it good enough, and so improve your pitching. And their bullpen is nails, and so interesting trade for Seattle, and I do like the player a lot that the Jays got back in the deal.
Was Garcia the best card the Jays had to play, excluding players that are under contract for next season and beyond?
I think Kikuchi is still going to bring something back. There's a lot of teams looking for starting pitching. Interesting that we saw the Orioles go after Zach Eflin. We kept hearing Tarek Skubal. We kept hearing about Garrett Crochet. I think Crochet's comments yesterday were so poorly timed, talking about that he won't go to the bullpen and that if he is going to start and he starts in October, he wants a contract extension. He's got no leverage whatsoever, but I think he backed teams off on it to the point where the White Sox, I think, would have more value in the offseason trading him when nobody's got to worry about giving a contract extension. So it was such an odd thing. His agent really misplayed it. But I do think that Kikuchi, there's going to be interest in Kikuchi out there still. And I think he may end up being the guy. I think Danny Jansen could bring back something too. It's going to be the right fit and the right location, but I think he could be a factor too. It's a good start, I think, for the Jays. And I would rather take one better, impactful prospect than two lesser guys and a guy that you think could be an everyday player. I think it's a good move on their part.
Is this, are these going to be worthwhile bets for the Jays as far as the guys that they're trying to bring back? Meaning, you bring back Clase. It sounds like he's got a lot of speed. There's a potential to have some power. Are those the kind of bets that these guys need to take? Find some offense. Maybe they can do something in your system and bring that to the major leagues.
Yeah, I think so. And, the Clase is a toolsy guy, right? So he's got tools. So he's got power and speed, and those are guys who become regular players, especially if you have that unique combination of power and speed, which he does have. And so, look, you never know when you get a prospect. And, but I also know this, when I was out there, I was willing to give up prospects in deals if it meant it was going to help me get to the playoffs. I was like, fine, I want to get to the playoffs. And, when we made the playoffs the one year, we had made moves at the deadline. We changed the coaches. My owner said to me that when I fired the coaches and brought in new coaches, we went from 27 and 28 in the first 55 games to 40 and 15 in the next. He said it was a $30 million decision because it was going to add $30 million to the run we went on in that season that we were in '99, and then you sell more for the following year, and it was a $30 million decision. So, when you bring in these guys that can ultimately do it, I would always give up the prospect because I'm like, look at what it does to your organization, your franchise. If it actually leads to winning, you'll get enough money to be able to buy more prospects somewhere to do it. And so I never shied away from giving up prospects. And so I think, and Jerry Dipoto makes deals. He's not shy. He'll give up something to get something, and I do think the Jays got something here.
Talking with our baseball insider, Steve Phillips. Steve, so we talk about, Garcia gone, Kikuchi probably gone, Trevor Richards might be traded. When they want to get some offense back, someone's got to pitch for this team. What are the Jays going to do about pitchers?
Yeah, they'll have to piece it together. I mean, here's the reality of it. It's going to get worse than what it is right now. I mean, that's just the reality is that when you're selling, you're setting yourself up to be worse. Think about how they feel in Chicago right now with the White Sox. If they trade Luis Robert and they trade Crochet, and they're already on pace for the worst record in the history of the game. And it's just the nature of where it goes. And so, they'll just keep calling up guys from AAA, and you'll end up with more of a AAA 4A pitching staff to go out there and compete. Now, you're still going to have Gosman, Brios, and Bassett. But I think that you could see some of the bullpen start to get decimated a little bit here. You're just going to have to grin and bear it, unfortunately.
For the guys that end up sticking around, Steve, how difficult is it going to be for, the management, the coaching staff, the players to kind of make it still like some kind of a positive environment? Because yes, guys are going to be moving on. There's going to be a lot of losses. There's not going to be a lot of light at the end of the tunnel here. How difficult is that going to be to navigate for this group going forward after the trade deadline?
No. Yeah, it's got a chance to be difficult, but I mean, I would call upon the professionalism of this group, and let's start to build some momentum to get things turned around and going in the other direction so we can start to build something for next year. So I think it's calling upon their pride and trying to think, look, even if we don't get there, let's spoil other people. Let's be the spoiler for teams. Let's be the one that people don't want to play here down the stretch. And with that, start to build some better confidence and connectivity for this team moving forward, because you're still going to have the core there. You want to get Bichette back healthy too and have him starting to get going a little bit, just so you have some thought and hope that it's going to get turned around again for next year.
Steve, the Jays lost 13-0 to Tampa yesterday. I mean, it doesn't matter if you lose 1-0 or 13-0, it's a loss, but still, at home, getting pounded like that. And Chris Bassett made the comment after the game that no one on this team has clean hands right now, and there does seem to be around the Blue Jays, you're hearing it from more than a few players, this aura of, or this atmosphere of defeat, it almost seems like. What did you read into that?
Yeah, I'm with you on it. And look, I think it's accountability, which I like. I mean, the reality is that everybody is responsible, right? The starting pitchers, where I think it's a good core three, they've not been as good this year as they were last year. The bullpen, I mean, think about Romano injured surgery, Swanson at AAA, Meza designated for assignment, so the bullpen has failed them miserably. And offensively, they haven't gotten it done. And remember, they sold everybody on internal improvements, and when you don't get that, the players are accountable, so are the coaches accountable. And so, I mean, look, if your job is to improve the production from last year to this year with the same players and it's not working, then you do have some accountability. Somehow, some part of your message isn't getting through to players who were good at one point and just aren't getting it done right now. So he's right. I mean, everybody's got some accountability in this. And that's the thing to build upon, though, is that we all have a responsibility. So let's all start to pull together to turn things around. And they need somebody in that clubhouse who can be that person to pull them together. Not usually a starting pitcher. It's hard to be a leader when you're underperforming. I mean, you can behave yourself, do the right thing, but it's hard to call people out when you're not getting it done either. And so Springer, just playing better now, and Justin Turner, who have been guys like that in the past, have lost some part of that ability because they've underperformed too.
Well, it feels like Springer would be that guy. Like, we've talked the last few summers, Steve, and it always sounds like, if George Springer's engaged, which he always is, but like he's the guy that kind of bangs the drum for the group, and the team kind of used to go the way George Springer would go. But now, I think the focus has to go to evaluation, and everyone's being evaluated from the management to the coaching staff to the players. If you're in management and the team is playing these garbage time games, for lack of a better term, how difficult, or is it difficult, to evaluate where your group is actually at?
Well, I think that in some ways it helps you evaluate your staff, your manager and your coaches. And I think it's, what I would be doing is beseeching, the players to start pulling together, to start rallying, to talk to Vlad and Bichette and Springer, to say, look, we got to pull this thing together. We can't just pack this in right now. We've got to find a way to get out there and start to fight and get things turned around, and really call upon the leaders, player leaders on the team, and then just keep working with your staff. Because what's the alternative? Pack it in, throw your arms up, say, well, you know what, we just can't do anything. We'll fix it next year. You got to keep battling. You got to keep grinding. And when it doesn't look like, when you don't hit, it looks lethargic. Like, I've had some teams that didn't hit, and I'm like, man, our energy level's so bad. But when somebody's not going first to third on a single, when they're on base, it looks like it's lethargic because you don't have anybody, doing anything. And that's what it's looked like a little bit, but that's more lack of offense than lack of caring. I do think they care. I do. I think they celebrate each other when things go right. I think they care. They just, when you're not winning, there's just not enough opportunity to rally together because everybody's sulking because they're suffering themselves, and they've got to find that way to fight. I would always say this when I would coach, youth football, and you got a whole range of different kids right there. And some kids would, when things didn't go right, would get sad, and other kids would get mad. And my thought was to everybody, you got to get mad. You can't be sad. You got to get mad. And that's got to be the message right now. They've got to get mad enough that they start battling harder to get things turned around.
Well, Steve, speaking of getting mad, things are getting hot in New York for the Yankees. Lost both games in the Mets. They're in a bit of a tailspin here. They're out of first place, back into a wild card spot. Do you think the Yankees will be active here at the deadline with a big splash?
Oh yeah, they really want to try to get Isaac Paredes from Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay is obviously, on a fire sale right now. Now, the interesting thing is that within the division, Paredes is controllable beyond this year, so I'm not convinced necessarily that they want to make a deal with the Yankees in that regard because Houston also is in on Isaac Paredes. But I think Brian Cashman's going to look at offense, whether that's second base or third base. Brandon Lau, second baseman for the Rays, could be available too. And his left-handed power bat had 4 hits against the Yankees the other day. And so, yeah, I do think that Brian Cashman does have pressure on him. I think it's much on him as anybody, especially because they got out to the great start and have built up expectations, especially because you gave up what you did for Soto, especially because you want to win and bring him back. Then especially because the Mets are playing so well right now. I mean, you talk about a tale of two cities in what the twist and turnaround has been, where the Mets got off to a horrible start. Now they're one of the best teams in baseball. And the Yankees got off to a great start. Now they're one of the worst teams in baseball. And so it's not going well for Yankee fans. When you lose in the interleague play to the Mets in the Subway Series, George Steinbrenner never would allow it. He would send Gene Michael, he would come out and scout us for 2 weeks everywhere we went, just to make sure they knew everything about us because George would not lose interleague play. Cal's not the same way, and the Mets are just playing out of their minds right now, and they're having fun. And that's what it looks like. And you know what? The lesson to be learned is that the Mets were playing awful on May 30th, and they had the Jorge Lopez situation where he got ejected. He threw his glove over the netting. They released him. He said, "I'm the worst teammate ever," and they thought he was on the worst team ever, so they released him, which was just a bad read on their part. But they had a meeting and said, we've got to get back to having fun. We love to play the game. We're not acting like it. And they faked it until they could make it, and they turned it around. And the Jays, are not that dissimilar from what the Mets are, that, you've got a lot of good players in the core of your team. You've got to get back to having fun and liking each other and rooting for each other instead of getting in your own head, beating yourself up. And the Mets did it, and they turned it around dramatically. Lindor is playing out of his mind right now. 5 homers in the last 4 games. And the Yankees are licking their wounds right now, feeling sorry for themselves, and they just can't. They're looking for what's going to go wrong on a night instead of what's going right.
It's always hard to compare, the Yankees market compared to any other market in Major League Baseball because it's so unique. There's so much pressure on them. But, I'll give you an example. Mike Francesa calls Yankees circus clowns. And here, it almost feels like Jays fans are somewhat apathetic to where the team is at right now. Just kind of curious, your peek behind the curtain, what did you prefer? Did you prefer just kind of, we're firm, we're hard on you, and maybe it crosses the line? Or, hey, no one really bothers us too much here. We'll kind of get to it when we get to it. Yeah. I'm not saying that's the way the management feels here, but you know what I mean? Question. That's the feel.
Yeah. Yeah. So I loved that I was a general manager in New York. I loved it. I actually thought that my job, the Mets job, was the toughest job in all of professional sports because I was crosstown from the Yankees. They have 27 World Series championships. They had George Steinbrenner, who gave them, there was no budget. There was no payroll limitations. They got what they wanted. They got whatever they needed to win. And yet the expectations, and, I had a budget and, had to work within it. And the expectations from Mets fans was, well, why can't we do what they're doing? And why can't we win like they're winning? And so it was tough. It was tough. And so when we went to the World Series against the Yankees in 2000, we ended up losing, but that for me was such an accomplishment. And I didn't feel it until on Game 3 of the World Series that year. I was up in my box before the game, and the energy of the crowd at Shea Stadium then was like the stadium was moving, and it had this hum to it and this sound to it. It was it was baritone voices, and it was this deep sort of, and I thought, man, look at what we've done for New York City right here. And so I loved that I was a general manager for Mets, but I will tell you, I would much prefer being a general manager for somewhere else now than going back and doing that again. I wouldn't want to do it again. I was glad I did it. Would not want to do it again. I would take almost any other city than New York right now.
Steve, before we go, I want to ask you this. When the dust settles at the deadline, what would be a good haul for the Blue Jays? What would they come away with? You'd say, okay, they've done a good job here.
Yeah, so it's not really numbers players because, for instance, like the Jonatan Clase that they got is better than a different organization's number 10 prospect. And he'll slot in much higher on the Blue Jays list when he comes in. And so I think it's, you want to come back with players that you think can be starting pitchers in your major league rotation or starting position players in your organization, not bringing guys in who you think, well, he's got a shot to be a role player at some point. He's got a shot to, so toolsy players, speed and power, they're impact players. They're starting players at the major league level. If a guy doesn't have power or speed, then he better hit 320 and have a 370 on base percentage to really have value for your team. And so I think toolsy players that are convert those into skills, and then starting pitching who can actually be from the middle of the rotation forward, because you can find back-ended guys anywhere you want. So middle of the rotation, forward arms. And you can always move them to the bullpen if you want to, but I want to try to get as many starting pitchers and everyday players as I can.
All right, Steve, thanks for talking to us, and we'll look forward to seeing what happens by Tuesday. It's going to be an interesting weekend.
It sure will. Thanks, guys, for having me. Appreciate it.
There's Steve Phillips joining us on the Maple Toyota hotline. Check out Maple Toyota's huge truck and SUV lineup, including Tundra, 4Runner, Highlander, and Grand Highlander in stock and ready to deliver. Visit mapletoyota.com.
That was one of your best reads.
Well, thank you.
It was really good. Very strong.
Reading has always been my specialty. All right. When we come back, we'll switch our attention to the Canadian Football League, and we'll talk to Cameron Dukes, the Argos quarterback. Argos are 3-3, taking on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers tomorrow, and we'll talk with him. Still, Josh Lewinberg's ahead. Talk about the Canadian basketball team, the men's basketball team, back in the Olympics for the first time in a long time. And we'll take on Greece tomorrow. Giannis is playing for Greece. He was there today at the opening ceremony. We'll also talk with Lawrence Applebaum, the CEO of Golf Canada, about the Canadian Women's Open going on right now and the future of that. So that's all coming up on OverDrive on TSN 1050, on TSN Plus, and your home speakers. It's OverDrive on this Friday. Mail It In Fridays brought to you by Boston Pizza, Canada's favorite sports bar. BP is serving fish bowls and ice-cold pints on the patio all summer long. So grab your sunscreen. Let's have ourselves a weekend. That sounds like an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Boston Pizza patio is calling.
It's always calling. Just if you answer,
that's the problem.
question.
How many times do you answer is the question. Still to come on this program, we'll talk to Josh Lewinberg, our basketball reporter, about the Canadian men's national team taking on Greece tomorrow in the Olympic basketball tournament. Also, we will talk with Lawrence Applebaum, the CEO of Golf Canada, about the CPKC Women's Open taking place in Calgary this weekend. Brooke Henderson's off to a good start there. She was the champion, but I think 6 years ago. She won the.
That long ago?
I think it was 2018. I think.
Okay, wow. Feels like yesterday she won that tournament.
By the way, the Canadian Olympic Committee announced that members of the Canadian women's national soccer team will be available to the media tomorrow after their training session. Canada plays France, the number 2 ranked team in the women's FIFA rankings, on Sunday. Their second game after the win against New Zealand on Thursday. The soccer competition begins before the actual Olympics begin because it takes longer to complete it. And so we will hear from the players. Now, we heard earlier from Josh Cloke of The Athletic that he expects that within the next 24 hours, FIFA, which oversees the soccer competition, men's and women's, at the Olympics, will make its decision on what, if any, actions will be taken against Canada for the use of drone recording of other teams' closed practice sessions. So tomorrow's going to be a busy day at the Olympics, both in terms of competition, but also in terms of news.
Yeah, and listen, we've been talking about it all afternoon, but it is a shame that, the kind of scandalous headline about the drones in Canada soccer is always going to be the front page news. And it's going to bury a little bit of the great stories that are going to be happening here as the athletes start participating. It shouldn't, but that's the nature of, the news of this kind of magnitude. But, Canada soccer really has no one to blame but themselves for this. And, the players on the team, they are victims of this. They obviously aren't the ones spearheading this. It comes, it comes from above them, and there's going to be more fallout and more news, and it's probably not going to stop for a long time as everyone gets their piece of the investigation ongoing.
Right, and that's going to be part of the narrative tomorrow, and hopefully, for the sake of the athletes who've worked so hard to get there, not just the soccer players, but all of them, that there'll be a chance for them to compete and get that spotlight. Also tomorrow, the Argos are in action against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Winnipeg 2-5 right now in the West Division. The Argos are 3-3. Kind of had their moments this year, and Cameron Dukes, their quarterback, is joining us now. Cameron, thanks for talking to us.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So, Cameron, first of all, it has been an interesting season for your club, which has had real good moments and not so great. How would you evaluate the year so far?
Yeah, like you said, we put some times together where we, go out and play a complete team game, and then there's times where, we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot and kind of fall back a little bit. But, it's a whole learning process for us. We're battling injuries. We're, battling things here and there, but, no excuse. We got to get it done. So we're looking forward to the challenge this weekend.
Cameron, you've been handed the reins here in Toronto and had a chance to really, prove yourself. How do you feel you've done so far this year?
Yeah, I think I've had times where I've shown, the ability to get it done and go out there and play my game, and then times where I'm still learning, still overcoming some things here and there. But I think it's part of the learning process for me and part of my journey. You just got to keep learning, keep growing, and keep getting better.
How do you think you adapted and adjusted to the Canadian game? You signed here in 2023, and now you're playing and you're the guy. How has that adjustment been?
Yeah, it's definitely been a learning process for me. It's definitely different than coming from down south playing in that game, and especially coming from the indoor football league, playing in that game. Just so 3 different games in 3 years on my journey up here. But now, just trying to learn every day. I take the reps in practice, take the reps in, game reps, and just try to keep, instilling that stuff in my brain that I keep seeing over and over again, and just trying to get more familiar with it every single time I go out and play.
And Cameron, you've been a starting quarterback before, but here you've been handed the reins at the pro level to be the week in, week out starter. What's the biggest challenge about being that guy every week?
I think the biggest challenge is just going out there and just putting your team in, a position to go out and, be successful, and, just especially in the, being thrown out there the way it was this year in the circumstances. Not everybody prepared for me to be the one doing it, but just going out and, like I said, just got to do what the coaches asked me to do and just go out and give our team a chance to be successful. Yeah.
So you guys got Winnipeg this weekend. They're 0-3 on the road this year. And you know what? The Blue Bombers every year most years are a very good team. Not a great season for them so far, 2-5. What do you kind of see with their game, and how do you approach the game this weekend?
Yeah, I think for us, we're not worried about wins and loss record. It's about going out each week and doing what you got to do to get the job done to go 1-0. So we're not worried about what their record is. We're just worried about going out and putting a complete game together for us, in all 3 phases to give us the best chance to win. But, for us, it's just protecting the house at home and, getting the job done. They're going to be ready and they're hungry for wins. So, we're hungry as well.
So you had a 4 interception game this year, and I know no quarterback wants to do that. When that happens, how difficult is it to get yourself in the mindset to still be aggressive and not worry about making a mistake?
Yeah, it's not very difficult. You got to be cautious of protecting the ball and, not putting your team in those kind of situations. But, I think the baseball background I have that teaches you amnesia of next play mentality kind of helps me. It's a learning process, like I've been saying, and having that kind of game where a few unfortunate bounces of the ball and a few bad reads on my part. And, it's just part of the journey, part of the process. And, you just got to take those mistakes, learn from it, and grow, and just go out there and not be scared to let it rip and trust your eyes.
So with this club this year, obviously, when you take over as a starter, part of the deal is getting to know your teammates. Do you feel at this point that you're a more confident quarterback than you were, say, 4 weeks ago?
Oh, 100%. I think every week, week in and week out, you build that confidence with your teammates and through the practice reps, through the game reps, and just getting to know everybody in and out of the locker room. I think the only thing that you can do is build confidence in these kind of situations. Regardless of the outcomes of some games and, some performances, you just got to keep going and, keep grinding it out with your teammates and, just keep building that confidence in each other and with everybody in the locker room, coaching staff and players included.
When you look back at your season so far, there's obviously there's highlights, there's games and reps that maybe you want back. Anything kind of stick out to you that was like a moment where you said, I can really grasp this, like I got this and I can run with it? Yeah,
I think, obviously the first two games I displayed my ability to get the job done at a high level. And then, you have the two games where, things really don't go your way. And, that's part of the learning curve that I'm in right now, young in my career. And but then to bounce back and get a win at Montreal, it just shows you that, you can bounce back, you can get it done. And, you're doing what the coaches ask you to do in those situations, regardless of what a stat line might look like. We're worried about going 1-0. I mentioned earlier in the year in an interview where, I'm not worried about personal accolades. I just want to help this team win ball games in whatever role that might be.
Well, Cameron, good luck tomorrow, and thanks for talking to us.
Yes, sir. Thank you all very much. I appreciate you having me.
All right. Cameron Dukes, the Argos starting quarterback. Sir. How about that?
Sir.
Very respectful.
I like that.
I think, the thing that is difficult to appreciate, I think, for people that aren't in it, and we talk about starting goaltenders like this, I think starting pitchers like this, and I think quarterbacks is how mentally difficult it is to be the guy week in, week out. Because you want to be that, right? You strive to be that. But the mental approach of what he talked about, when things don't go well, you got to right back out.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you can't let in football, you can't let a bad week become a bad month. In hockey, you can't let a bad game become a bad week, become a bad month. Pitchers can't, you only pitch every 5 days. The same thing. Mentally, that's difficult.
Yeah, what's interesting? Like, it's not just the goalies, and I found making the jump from the AHL to the NHL, that is very applicable. Because AHL, let's say you play on a Friday, a Saturday, sometimes you would play those 3-3s on the Sunday, and it's like you almost had all week to pace yourself and ramp it up, get your head wrapped around it, and you would do it. And it would be like this repetitive pattern. In the NHL schedule, as you know, you're calling games all the time. It's random. It's Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday, sometimes 4 games in a week. So you don't get that time to come down and then ramp it up again. It's like you play a game, you got to get ready for the next one. Next thing you know, 2 weeks have gone by, you played 7 games. Like it's really difficult. And, to your point, it can really cascade. It can really compound where a one bad game can turn into 2 weeks of bad games. And we see that happen. And sometimes you're out of the league. Like that's a very real thing as well, if you're not like one of those more established players.
And that's the challenge, I think, for young players coming into any league, but especially the NHL where teenagers play a lot, right? Not many teenagers play in Major League Baseball. Almost none play in basketball, and obviously none play in football. Can you imagine a teenager playing in the NFL? No, it would not be good.
Yeah.
But the mental aspect of the game is really tough because especially now, there's no easy squares in the schedule.
No.
Right? Everybody's pretty good. You take the worst team, and take San Jose last year. They still beat some good teams.
They beat Edmonton.
Right.
Right?
Right? Handily.
Yeah.
Right? So that to me is for young players. And when people talk about, putting young draft picks in the lineup, it's a grind.
You need still to insulate those guys.
Right.
Like whether it's the coaching staff that does it or having some veteran guys who can put out fires. Like it is important to make sure you have, some insulation around those guys. I don't know how you feel about this year, Gord, like some of the coaching changes that have been made around the league. But it's funny, the odds came out for the Jack Adams.
Right.
Do you know who's the leader right now? The betting
Craig
favorite?
Berube?
It's not Craig Berube. It's Sheldon Keefe.
In New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Well, that's an interesting one because, so I vote on that. And I really think that it's too often a guy in his first year on the job.
It always is a guy in his first year.
Right. Now Rick Tocchet he was in his first full year on the job in Vancouver. He'd been there for part of the year before. But I tend to lean away from guys who were in their first year on the job. Now, in some cases, like Jim Montgomery, unavoidable.
You might have no choice.
He was the coach of the year, no question about it. But yeah, I mean, look at New Jersey. They're going to get Dougie Hamilton, presuming Dougie Hamilton's back healthy, so they'll get a healthier defense. They seem to have addressed their goaltending issues. They had lots of injuries to guys up front. Like, assuming they're healthier, they should be a much better team.
Yeah, they should be a playoff team.
Right.
Yeah, they should be.
And the coach of the year, it tends to be the guy whose team exceeds expectations.
Exactly. You get there's a big pop, team improves a lot. Like Sheldon Keefe, there's the potential for it. And it's funny because in Toronto, I don't think Sheldon Keefe was ever really sniffing a Jack Adams because you have the core four and those guys are so highly paid. And it's like, hey, we just expect you to be a very good team because you have players that are getting paid, to make you a good team. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic shifts with him going to New Jersey in a very different, cap dynamic.
When you think about the great coaches in the history of the game and how rarely they've won the Jack Adams, I think Scotty Bowman won it twice. Pat Burns won it 3 times in his first year with each team.
Yeah, it's the first year thing.
Right.
So if you go through the favorites right now, it's Sheldon Keefe at number 1, Andrew Burnett's number 2, so that would be his second year in Nashville, but it's Craig Berube at 3, Travis Green at 4, and then Chris Knobloch, and then Lindy Ruff, who's back in Buffalo. So it is, heavily skewed to coaches who are with a team for the first year.
See, I think John Cooper deserves a ton of credit in Tampa. Like, to be on the job for a decade and still be productive and still be. I mean, obviously Tampa's not the team it was, but I mean they make the playoffs every year. To be a guy in your 10th year with kind of the same group of guys and still getting your message through,
for sure. I think that's
and coaching a good team is hard too.
Yes, because you have to make sure that those guys who are good players who want the puck, they're not tuning you out. You have to make sure that they get enough of their reps. Sometimes there's just not enough puck to go around for all those guys, especially after all those years. But you know what, John Cooper, the shine will probably never go away on him as a coach in Tampa Bay. The thing is, there's always going to be that story that is new, and that kind of, that will make his diminished a little bit on a year-to-year basis, like the Montgomery thing. Rick Tocchet this year in Vancouver, it's like, okay, those are new. It's hard to ignore it, and they deserve credit because, they took a team from point A, which wasn't very good, to point B, which is, in Boston's case, best regular season team of all time, and in Rick Tocchet's case in Vancouver, a team that a lot of people didn't have pegged to go to the playoffs, winning the Pacific Division.
And that's going to be the test. I think Vancouver's in for... Expectations are up in Vancouver.
They are.
For individuals, for the team, and that's a tough thing to live up to sometimes. We welcome those of you joining us on TSN4. The Olympic opening ceremony is over. OverDrive is brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Still to come, Josh Lewinberg, our basketball reporter. We'll talk about the Canadian men's basketball team getting ready to play Greece tomorrow. We'll talk to Lawrence Applebaum, the CEO of Golf Canada, about the CPKC Women's Open taking place in Calgary this week, and still more to come on OverDrive on TSN4, TSN 1050, your home speakers, and the app. Come up at 6 o'clock on OverDrive. Gord Miller, Frankie Corrado here on this Friday. Mail it in Friday. Brian Hayes, the captain, taking the day off again. Nice.
Again.
Good for him.
When was the first day off?
Did he mail it off? Did he mail it in 2 Fridays ago?
Summer schedule. It's,
it's funny. I said to him yesterday on the show, what are you doing tomorrow? Nothing.
Taking the day off.
Taking the day off.
Yeah.
As one does.
He's got to be well rested because once, Labor Day comes and he's got to steer the ship with
the boys,
Noodles and O-Dog, like that takes a chunk out of you.
Listen, I try to wrangle Noodles on the road all year. I can tell you it's not an easy job.
Is that are you tasked with that on the road?
He's actually not. I kid because he's actually not that difficult to wrangle.
No,
he likes things a certain way.
He's regimented.
He's very regimented.
Yeah.
He likes things a certain way, and so you just make sure you know that.
Yep.
Your food's going to be plain.
Your food or his food?
Like the food, where you go, the food's going to be plain. Like you're not going to a restaurant that has kind of a let's say a menu that is
eclectic,
food forward.
Right.
You're going food backward. You're going.
I'll tell you what you're doing. You're going with the greatest hits.
You're eating a 12-year-old's cuisine. You're like, whatever a 12-year-old boy would eat. That's what.
Hey, you know what? It's simple, but it works.
Yeah,
it's effective,
likes.
Right? Everyone likes that.
So if you're just joining us, the Olympic cauldron has been lit. It's a hot air balloon that is levitating over Paris. Celine Dion sang. The athletes were in boats on the River Seine in the rain. There was a fashion show on a bridge. There was some interesting stuff going on, but
the fashion show
was...
What is that kind of fashion? Like, are people expected to dress?
Not exactly what I'd wear. Here we are wearing golf shirts, but yeah, so we're not exactly fashion police, but
No.
There was a lot of fashion forward stuff there. But tomorrow, Leila Annie Fernandez is playing in tennis. Bianca Andreescu as well. Canadian men's basketball team plays Greece. The swimmers, Maggie McNeil and Summer McIntosh, will be in the pool for the first time tomorrow. So it all gets underway. And of course, there's been so much talk about the women's soccer controversy. If you missed it earlier today, Bev Priestman will not be coaching Canada at the Olympic tournament. She's been replaced by the COC. She's been removed as the head coach by the COC.
Do we know who's coaching yet? Have they
one of the
announced
assistants,
the name? One of the assistants who was also involved in Drone Gate?
We don't know that.
You know what I mean? Like, it's now you start peeling back the layers.
Yeah.
And Priestman is obviously the one who, I mean, she would have been the one spearheading it. She's the leader.
Yeah.
And so now the assistants who are involved, they're going to be the ones running the show.
Now, what we have to find out yet, and this was brought up by Josh Cloak in our last hour, is that FIFA has yet to be heard from. So again, the International Olympic Committee runs the Olympics, the overall Olympics. So the drug testing, the organization, everything like that. But the individual sports are run by the governing bodies. So at the Winter Olympics, the International Ice Hockey Federation runs men's and women's hockey. And at the Summer Olympics, FIFA runs men's and women's soccer. And FIFA is investigating what happened and has not yet ruled. Canada has a win in the books already, beat New Zealand on Thursday. But there's talk that FIFA could strip those points away from Canada, leave them with 0 points entering their game against France.
That should be
Sunday.
the bare minimum. Like something should happen. There has to be some kind of punishment.
So we expect the announcement within 24 hours. Members of the Canadian women's national team will speak to the media tomorrow on a media conference call at about, I think it's about 10 a.m. our time. And so we'll get a sense of what they're thinking. We heard today from Christine St. Clair, among others, who talked about, we won working hard. I never saw drone footage.
We could take that at face value, too, because she's not the one who is operating that whole thing. But I do wonder, Gord, if this happened to a more prominent soccer nation. I understand where Canada lies on the women's side, but let's just say, soccer nations, Canada is not known for being a soccer nation. If this happened to an Argentina or a Portugal or a Spain, would the punishment be less harsh? Meaning, would you come down more on Canada saying, because we can? Because, the outcry in your country, if we come down on you hard, is not going to be as big as if that happened to Spain or Argentina, et cetera.
Right. And that's a bit of the narrative in Canada has been, well, lots of countries do this. Well, they haven't been caught. But it's a great point. We used to say about the NCAA, they were so mad about recruiting violations at North Carolina that they suspended Fresno State for 4 years.
Right.
So, I mean, because would they go after them the same way? It's hard to know until it happens. But certainly a precedent's going to be set here. This is kind of unprecedented.
It's easier to make an example against the Canada as opposed to
it is for sure.
Spain.
It is. And Spain has more of a voice probably at FIFA than Canada does.
Yes.
But the fact is, Spain didn't get caught doing this.
Right.
Argentina Canada did get caught, and the rules apply to them. So we'll see what FIFA does with this. And that'll be interesting to watch, because I do think that certainly Soccer Canada has tried really hard to close the chapter on this, say, look, we've taken action, we're investigating, we've made these moves, let's move on. Others are going to say, hang on a sec. And one of the things is, too, that in terms of a team sport, soccer, basketball, volleyball, the coach is considered a part of a participant. They don't win a medal, but they're considered a participant. They decide the lineup, they decide substitutions, who takes penalties, all this stuff. They are active during the game. And so actions by the coaching staff are considered actions of the team. They consider for discipline purposes, they consider the team to be a unit. And that's going to be tricky.
Yeah. Ultimately, the team still needs to go out there and play. They need to execute. You could have all the information. You could steal everything that you want from a practice. If you don't go out there and you don't beat the other team, none of it's going to matter. And we talked about this in the first hour. Watch the tape. Watch the team play. There's no secrets out there. If you study for the test, there's actually no secrets. When you try and cheat, this is what happens. You get burned.
Right. So we'll find out what's going to happen in the next 24 hours on that front. Still to come, Hour 3 of OverDrive on TSN 2 coming up on TSN 1050 on the app and your home speakers.